Hi BookTube, welcome to a Sideline video, a somewhat gruesome Sideline video, I have to say. You remember, not long ago, I reviewed Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bastarrica. And I thought, that review won't get many views, won't get many people talking, because all the talking's been done. That book was such a sensation when it came out. Everybody read it. I came on to YouTube and that's all I could see online for videos. Everybody reviewing Tender is the Flesh. So I'm late to the party. That's my usual trick. You will get to know me. That's how I rock and roll. I read the book that everybody else has read 10 years after they've all read it and forgotten about it. And yet, I got a lot of comments. Not only did I get a lot of comments, they're very thoughtful. They got me thinking about the book. And I thought, well, I'd really love to say something more. I almost wish that I hadn't done the review yet. So I thought, well, hey, why don't we just continue the discussion anyway? Okay, before anything else, spoiler alert, big spoiler alert. This video really, it's for people who've already read Tender is the Flesh, or people who think they probably never will read Tender is the Flesh, but they've got a curious streak. Maybe they just want to learn more in a safe way. I am going to reveal important plot points, so please go ahead and make a graceful exit now if you really want to preserve the mystery of the book. It's not a problem. Right, the first interesting comment that I got from doing this review was from an Argentinian university professor. And I haven't been able to engage that person in a dialogue, which is unfortunate. But I think when people are just viewers, he didn't have a channel where he was making content. And I think when you make content, you check out the comments you're getting back more regularly. But I'm going to read what he did say, because it was interesting. He said, Argentinian literature professor here. I thought this book was extremely bad, and most of my colleagues think the same. I genuinely do not know why this book got the attention it has, other than all the horrible gore it describes for most of its narration. Now, obviously I wanted him to say more. I wrote him back a comment and I said, I'd love to discuss this. It'd be really great. Tell me more. Tell me, in detail what you and your colleagues did not like about it. Because I thought, wow, imagine getting a university level opinion on that. But he hasn't come back so far. And that may just be because he doesn't make content. He's just viewing videos. He said his piece. He's watching something else now. So I might not hear from him. I tried to figure out I wonder what it is that might be bothering him about Tender is the Flesh. What I hope won't be bothering him is any idea that just because this book is set in a dystopian Argentina, that we form any kind of bad opinion about Argentina as a result of reading Tender is the Flesh. It's very, very clear early in the novel that what is happening in Argentina, this version of Argentina, the novel's version, is happening all over the world. And it's not clear exactly where things got started or even if there was a single starting point. And when I said in my review that I didn't think the setting was important to the novel, what I should have said is that most dystopias really, they can only exist in a single country, if the leadership can isolate its people completely from the effects of other cultures, or the whole world is in the dystopia, or if you get really big, sometimes it's galactic, the dystopias in some science fiction. The novel did remind me of George Orwell's 1984. In places, I don't mean that I think it's the literary equivalent of 1984, although time may prove me wrong. But 1984 is set in a dystopian England, but I don't think anybody reads it and thinks, England, because the society has changed so much and everything is so different that I just don't think that it occurs to you, oh yeah, this is the country of England. It's just a whole new world, and that's how you picture it. And similarly, when I read Tender is the Flesh, I realized the novel was, I couldn't make any kind of judgment about Argentina based on the novel, because the world had changed so much it would tell me nothing except possibly the odd place There's a zoo that's mentioned in the novel. Maybe that zoo is a real place right now, but of course it's probably open and has live animals now, and that was not the case, well, not entirely the case, in Tender is the Flesh. And then he did make this remark about all the gore that you get in the narration. And okay, this is just my estimation, but more of the blood and the violence that you get in Tender is the Flesh is expressed very secondhand. It's a reportage style of narration. I think I did say that in the review. And so it feels like someone's choosing for you, the reader, what you're going to witness and what you're going to be told about and what you're not going to be told about. I think that's why I was able to finish this novel without a great deal of discomfort, because it didn't immerse me in the experience of violence. It didn't give me prose that showed the horror as my five senses would perceive it, unfiltered, moment by moment. Bas Tariqa could have done that, and I would have found the book unbearable, absolutely unbearable. But I always felt that I was just a little at a distance, just a little. It was like watching the evening news, right? You see horrible things on the news, but it's all curated, and the newsreaders, they all sound calm and matter of fact. And so watching the news about Palestine, for example, is not the same as being in Palestine. I don't think I need to say that, but I'll say it just because then I can go on and go, I think Bas Tariqa's narration in Tender is the Flesh is more like watching the news than it is like being there. And the second interesting comment came from Marion, who creates the channel Writer in Rwanda. And we were discussing the question, what would be the most pragmatic solution if we had a situation where animals were no longer a safe food source? And I'm going to read her comment. She says, but I think if we got to that situation, we'd probably lab grow human cells into burgers or genetically modify them to resemble beef or pork. The main reason that hasn't taken off yet is that it's incredibly expensive to produce at scale for a market that is lukewarm about the idea. But if it was the only source of meat, I reckon it would become profitable pretty quickly. That seems more plausible than jumping straight to cannibalism. It takes about 8 weeks to lab grow a burger. It takes 9 months to grow a small human. And so logistically, labs make more sense and don't require anything to die in the process. And that's a really, really good point. It is. Raising humans for meat would be extremely inefficient because we take so long to get full-sized, don't we? Anyone who found the scenario worrying, I think you could take comfort in that. When I replied to Marion, I kind of wondered out loud, why would Bas Tariqa pick such an obviously unlikely scenario? And I wondered if she was affected by her experience of COVID-19, given when the book would have been written. I did some research to see what I could learn about what was the COVID experience in Argentina. And according to the World Health Organization, Argentina was really good. They took early measures, including lockdown closures of businesses and schools, earlier than Britain, for example, did in 2020. I don't think we didn't get lockdown until late March, because I can remember updating my mobile phone and thinking, I got to hurry. I've got a week to do this, and then I've got to shut myself up in my house. And I can remember just getting my new phone in time. So I think Argentina in late 2019 had already put measures in place. Now, they did get their first confirmed case of COVID in March 2020, but they kept their infection rate down in some places, but had more of a struggle in others. So in Buenos Aires province, and in Buenos Aires in particular, there was a very high death rate, and it mostly centered around, I think, what the WHO called, what do they call it? Informal urban settlements, which I think is just a very nice word for slums. So in other words, where there were areas of high poverty, there was also a high death rate. So I was wondering, is that really where Bas Tariqa was coming from when she started the novel? Was she thinking about those high levels of infection in the very poor communities in Argentina? And was she speculating whether the virus, I'm not saying that she thought that COVID-19 was deliberately employed to kill off the elderly or the poor, but that a government or many governments might find themselves less energetic about giving resources to help those groups because, well, they're usually less energetic about giving resources to help the old and the poor. And so when you read Tender is the Flesh, there are hints, aren't there, that this infection which caused animals to become unfit for food that might have been cured, right? And yet research into a vaccine never really got anywhere. Why? There's always that question mark hanging in the air. The disease has brought about a significant reduction in the human population. So crowded cities are quieter, the air is cleaner, probably water is cleaner. There's probably a lot of environmental benefits, which just came as they could almost come as a side effect. But you could see someone thinking, well, why do anything about it? Because actually, look, there's this benefit, and I am putting that, sorry, I should put it in two sets of air quotes, but I've got the little automatic controller for the phone in the other hand. So you've got it except one set. But you could see her thinking that maybe just by sheer uncaring or just neglect, and then neglect, someone realizes the neglect is having a benefit. And so they think, oh, just keep neglecting it. That's easier than doing something. I just wonder if that's really where her thinking was going, rather than considering whether eating humans really would have been a viable solution for anybody. And that leads nicely to the third comment, which came from Joseph Francis Burton. Hi, Joe. And I'm going to read your comment, Joe. I helped slaughter a delicious lechon. Oh, hang on. It's not French, is it? It's Spanish. So would you say lechon? You can correct my pronunciation. I should look that up. But there we go. I'm trying to wing it now, Joe, and I see what you mean. It's not so easy to do. Anyway, I helped slaughter a delicious lechon last week for a New Year's celebration. Since I am heartless when it comes to killing porky, I am not sure I am the intended audience for a book like this. Or maybe I am exactly the audience that Bastarika is hoping to reach. Yeah, and that was a really good question, Joe, because I wondered as I read the book, and even after I finished it, I came to the book expecting that I was going to get effectively told off for still being an omnivore, for still eating meat. That's what I thought the book was going to try and do. And I'm not saying that the book didn't have me thinking sometimes about that. It did. It did sometimes make me think, yeah, diet, interesting. But I was surprised at how I did react to this whole inefficient scenario. I had many different levels of disturbed. I'll try and explain that depending upon what was happening. So in other words, I was most uneasy. Let's put it another way. I was uneasy, but I was placated by the measures that were taken to ensure that the human livestock, which are called heads, I was happier, less distressed when I find out that that there was a process for moving them through the slaughtering, which took into consideration trying to keep them calm and at ease and safe. And I thought, and that their death should be as humane as it could be. I was comforted, I suppose, in the same way I'm comforted to know that people slaughter animals in the most humane way they can. And I was most disturbed when there were actions that caused the human livestock unnecessary distress. That's when I found the situation more difficult to read about. And that's not really, it still seems like a level of hypocrisy on my part, because shouldn't I just be equally disturbed by the whole thing? And strangely enough, I wasn't. And of course, I was always aware that humans, because we have bigger brains, would be too intelligent not to perceive exactly what was going on. So yeah, there's that bothered me all the time. I thought, these are not cattle. These are not fish. These are, there's a level of awareness that makes knowing that you are going to die really, really difficult to deal with. But I was not able to honestly, therefore, compare it with raising animals for food. And so if Bastarika's aim was to make people opposed to meat eating, I'm not sure how effective that would be. But before I say anything else, I should just, because this is a sensitive subject, I should pause here and say this video, everyone, it's not a proper discussion about my position on human diet. And I'm not using this time to talk about that. And I'm certainly not trying to convince anybody that they should or shouldn't eat anything. I'm really just speculating on whether or not Basterica was trying to convince anybody. There are no vegetarian or vegan characters in Tender is the Flesh. No one. And there are no perfect characters. Not even, I don't think there's even any good characters. If by good you mean they've never killed or eaten another human. I think they all have. I will mention one character in particular, though. His name is Sergio. And in fact, I'll read you a passage from the novel which introduces him. Now, before I do, I think it'd be best if I gave a trigger warning right now. I don't know how this passage might affect some people, but if you want to mute your sound, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a picture up on screen that will, instead of my face, that will be on screen all the time that I'm reading this passage. So if you want to mute as soon as you see the picture change, and then unmute when you see it come back to this lovely scene here, that's great. Please do. I wouldn't expect anybody to listen to the reading, just in case there might be something that's a little too much for some people. Okay, so I'm going to start reading now from the beginning of chapter 11. That's pages 68 and 69 in the paperback copy. They enter the box sector, but stop in the lounge, which has a large window that faces the desensitization room. The place is so white, it blinds them. He has them wait there, and the shorter man asks why they can't go in. The taller man takes a seat. He answers that only authorized staff wearing the required uniform can go in, that all the necessary measures are taken to ensure the meat isn't contaminated. Sergio, one of the stunners, waves to him and then comes into the lounge. He's dressed in white and has on black boots, a face mask, plastic apron, helmet, and gloves. Sergio gives him a hug. Tejo, where have you been, mate? On the meat run, dealing with clients and suppliers. Let me introduce you. He goes for the occasional beer with Sergio. He thinks he's a genuine guy, one who doesn't smirk at him for being the boss's right-hand man, who's not trying to get something from him, who has no problem telling him what he thinks. When the baby died, Sergio didn't look at him with pity or say, Leo is a little angel now. He wasn't silent around him, not knowing what to do, and he didn't avoid him or treat him any differently. Sergio hugged him and took him to a bar and got him drunk and didn't stop telling him jokes till the two of them laughed so hard they cried. The pain was still there, but he knew that in Sergio he had a friend. Once he asked him why he worked as a stunner. Sergio answered that it was either the heads or his family. It was the only thing he knew how to do, and it paid well. Whenever he felt remorse, he thought of his children and how the work enabled him to give them a better life. He said that even though the original meat from before the product was bred didn't eliminate overpopulation, poverty, and hunger, it did help fight them. He said that everything has a purpose in this life, and the purpose of meat is to be slaughtered and then eaten. He said that thanks to his work, people were fed, and that was something he was proud of. Sergio kept talking, but he couldn't listen any longer. They went out to celebrate when Sergio's eldest daughter started university. He asked himself, while they raised their glasses in a toast, how many heads had paid for the education of Sergio's children, how many times he'd had to swing a club in his life. He offered Sergio the chance to work by his side as his assistant, but the man was blunt. I prefer striking. He valued the answer and didn't ask for an explanation because Sergio's words are simple, clear. They're words that don't have sharp edges. Okay, we'll just allow a few seconds for anybody who dived out, muted out of the reading to come on back and join us. So I feel that passage that I just read was a very sympathetic portrayal of Sergio, the man who does the worst job in that human slaughterhouse. He comes face to face with another person and he kills them over and over and over. They just keep coming and he just keeps killing them all day, every working day. But if Basterica had wanted her novel to be anti-carnivore, then she would have made Sergio the most evil personality. She would have found some way to add, but she juxtaposes his shocking job with the kind of down-to-earth, honest, and true friend that he turns out to be to the protagonist, Marcos Tejo. And I just think if Bastarrica had intended to turn more people away from eating meat, then she would have created also a hero that is her protagonist, Marcos Tejo, would have become a hero or been a hero in some way, overcome something, gone above what everybody else does. But that isn't how this book goes, as anyone who's read it knows. In some ways, yes, Marcos resists. He stops going to the laboratory, which purchases human livestock to do experiments on. He can't stand that. He hates it, and he doesn't want to keep going, and you understand that. And he falls out and has a big argument and a breakup, I think, with his sister, because she's following a fad that is called death by 1,000 cuts, and I'm not going to describe that. It is awful. If you want to read about it, you can read about it. You absolutely can. But then, if you get to the end of the novel, Marcus does something that you... Okay, let me just give my reaction. Other people may have reacted differently. I understood it, but I didn't feel it was forgivable, and I felt that he was going to suffer for making that decision. But I understood why he made it. I understood the yearning. I understood the human need to have a child. Hey, we're doing spoilers here. So I understand why he did what he did, but I don't think it's forgivable. And I do think it would have been interesting if the book had carried on and talked about what would happen as that child grew up. I would have liked to have known how that would go, because I think that decision would come back to haunt Marcos. But since the book ends, you're left with it, and you so I had mixed feelings, and I'd be interested to know how other people reacted to that too. So these are just some random thoughts, and thank you so much to everybody who's commented, because it kept my brain ticking over about this book, and this is what I come to BookTube for. I come to BookTube for people to go, hey, I've been thinking this, or now, there's one thing that book didn't do, or I just love that. I feed on that. And perhaps that's not a great metaphor since we're talking about this particular book, but never mind. It's true. I feed on the thoughts of other people. So thank you, everybody, for giving me those thoughts. I'm going to be with you in a few days' time. I've got a nonfiction review, and it's quite cool. It's about American prisoners of war that were held in Britain during the War of 1812. And what happened to them. That's a fantastic little book. So do look out for that on Sunday. Okay, everybody. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.